it's a question from Karyappa. Hi, Stephanie. What are the main factors companies look for in graduates? And can you give us some tips on how to stand out from the crowd?
That's a really good question. I think it really depends on the role you're applying for. So the only example I can give is for my own role for technology risk consultant. So I basically, most companies have very standard tests like those online tests like math tests, like verbal reasoning and things like that. So that is basically very common and it's very standard. But I think the moment where they see whether you're a so-called outstanding candidate is probably during the assessment center, because that's the time when they get to meet you face to face. They get to see if you're good with like group exercise, how you talk to the partner. I think making an impression when you have that one-on-one with the partner is also really important. So I guess I would say I'll probably focus my advice on the assessment center side. And I can say, like, for my assessment center, what I can give you a bit of like structure, what happened. I don't know if that would be helpful.
Yeah, I think so, definitely.
Yeah. So for my assessment center, there was 3 parts to it. So part 1 was a group exercise. And the group exercise contained, I think, a few sections, but all the sections are linked together. And the main goal was to, I think, if I remember correctly, we had to create a company or something like that. And honestly, the idea is that whether you're good, but it doesn't matter how good you are with like coming up with the company name or things like that. At the end of the day, they don't really look at that. They don't look at the content. They look at how you interact with other people. And one huge tip that I got from someone that I think really helps everyone, and it helped me personally, was that a lot of like us think that, oh, like when you go into these assessment centers, especially group exercise, there will be 1 or 2 people who are really outspoken, and you feel like you wouldn't be able to kind of get in and have your point. You can't like say your point because everyone's just keep on like snapping at each other because everyone's trying to make a good impression. So one good way to stand out is to either be the timekeeper or be the note taker. And a reason why that's a good thing to stand out is because as the timekeeper, it shows that you're trying to ensure that your discussions are within the time limit. So each section is around 5 minutes. So once the 5 minutes marks is over, the invigilator will say, stop. And obviously, if you're the timekeeper, you can tell the team, oh, by the way, we only have a minute left, guys. Let's like wrap up right now and summarize everything. And that's a great way. I think it does show leadership as well, because it shows that, you look at the time and you make sure that your team is, working together within the time limit. And the second thing about note taking, why it's so important, again, it kind of shows leadership as well, because you're a good listener. You're listening to everyone's points and you're putting it together, you're summarizing. And it's also a good way to speak as well, because once everyone's done talking, you can be like, oh guys, okay, these are the notes I've written. Let me just quickly summarize what everyone's points are. And you basically repeat everyone's points. So if you think about it, you don't even have to think of your own points. You just kind of summarize everyone, but just by doing that already showed that you are such a good listener and you're a team player and you're a leader, like all these good qualities. And that's what I did. And I feel like maybe that's the reason why I got hired, but you never know. But I thought that was this great advice. And I think that's really helpful. And after the group exercise, we had it was a written test. So what happened was we were given like a 12 to 13 page long like booklet that contained like different information about this company merger situation. So it was an M&A between 2 companies, and it was like there was a lot of words. And what you had to do was to write kind of like a analysis on that company, on those 2 companies. And one main thing about that I would say is to write a SWOT analysis. So a strength, weakness, opportunities and threats.
Yeah.
And that's great, because what you do is you already structured it in such an easy way for the invigilator to read when they are reading your analysis. And also when you're reading the 12-page long booklet, I would say skim read it first, because you want to skim read it and quickly take notes. I think, if I think clearly, we were allowed 10 minutes to read, but you aren't allowed to highlight anything. Yeah. And you weren't allowed to take notes. But what I did was that I quickly had a quick read within 10 minutes. And then once the timer started, I was able to write. I quickly wrote down all the notes I had first. And then I started typing. And what they're looking for is nothing to do with content again. Obviously, don't write something that's completely outrageous and doesn't make sense at all. But if you do like a basic analysis, I had no degree background in business or finance. So they had a few financial statements in there and I had no idea what was happening. So I just kind of ignored it and wrote the bits where I understood.
Okay.
And I think they look at like spelling, they look at grammar, they look at how you structure things and whether you're able to use a SWOT analysis. So I think that's the main point that they're looking for. And one of another advice I thought was really helpful was to write in bullet points, but not in short bullet points, in long bullet points. So it kind of helps you structure the whole like paragraph a bit neatly.
Sure. Yeah.
So that was really helpful. And finally, there was the one-on-one interview with a partner.
Yeah.
And it was quite stressful because for my role, we had to do a presentation. So before the assessment center, we were given a topic that we had to discuss during our assessment center. So I had to prepare for that as well. And what I had to prepare was to talk about a company that I work for and what kind of technology I can incorporate in that company to streamline their systems.
Nice. Wow.
And it was quite difficult because, again, graduate, no idea anything about tech or business. So I did a lot of research into like a company that I worked for before. And it doesn't matter if you've never done any internship. It can be a charity organization, or at the end of the day, you can just research any companies online and talk about it. And one big advice I would say is to look through all the values of the company, because that's what they're going to ask you for. So let's say if the value is resilience, one of the values is resilience, they're probably going to ask you, tell me a time when you showed resilience, and you have to talk about that. So I think prepare all the like some kind of examples you have regarding each value of the company. That would probably help you a lot during these partner interviews. And I think one last key point, sorry, I'm just going on and on,
No,
is
brilliant.
I just want to give out all the tips. One big advice I would say is when you're done with the interview, obviously the partner is going to ask you, oh, do you have any questions? And this is the question that a lot of people find difficult. And honestly, this is the question that I find very difficult as well, because I'm like, I don't know. I just want to work for your company. Just hire me, please. So what I went for was, because I knew that for my role, a lot of people get to travel a lot and go on secondments, as I mentioned, in different countries and in different member firms around the world. And that was something that I was really interested in. So I was trying to phrase the question in a professional way, something like, oh, I'm really interested in secondments as well. And I know that in this program, you do have something like this offer to like your graduates. Is this something that, you know, have you gone on secondment before, or have you traveled around for work before? And honestly, the partners start telling me about all his experiences traveling around the world, how he went to New York, Miami, and that probably he spent like another 5 minutes talking about that. And by the time the interview already ended, so he couldn't ask me any more questions. So it was good.
That's clever.
And you can probably tell like a little bit of sign that it went well if the partner smiled a lot. So, you know, I guess that's a good sign, I hope. But yeah, I hope those are good advice.
Really good advice. Stephanie, you probably absolutely aced the interview. I mean, you're
No.
being so modest, but honestly, of course, those are really, really good signs. And it's establishing rapport, isn't it? And just remembering that the person interviewing you is, you know, a human being, and they're doing probably back-to-back interviews. And if you can, you know, ask them an interesting question and get them excited to talk about something, then that's great for them, isn't it? And you're going to be more memorable as well long after the interview finishes. It sounds like it went really well. Well, obviously did, because you're 2 years into your job. So that's really, really good. Those tips are amazing. And I picked up on a couple of things that I think are so important. So you didn't study a kind of a business degree or a finance degree or anything, but you still understood the importance of having commercial awareness. And this is really such an important point for all of you. And it doesn't matter what industry you want to get into, whether it's got nothing to do with kind of finance or business. Every company is a business. You know, every single company has stakeholders. They've got clients they need to keep happy. They've got, you know, their eye on numbers and their big financial team and departments. And, you know, they need to be thinking about their competition and what threats are going to come up and affect their you know, their performance and their industry. So if you can start thinking along these lines, that's going to really impress an employer, because I think a lot of students don't think about that at all. You know, you might do some research by going on the company website and, you know, reading about kind of the different departments and things, but I think few students go really beyond that and start really taking in kind of industry news and looking at you know, what's happening and what's going to affect that company, and really just not just reading newspapers, but reading kind of industry specific online resources and just taking it all in. And I love what you said about, you know, a SWOT analysis. And I think you don't have to be a business student to have a very basic understanding of what a SWOT analysis is. So in case you don't know yet, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. I do that here within the business as well. You know, COVID-19, that's a perfect example of a threat. So just remember that commercial awareness, commercial thinking is going to be important, and it doesn't matter which company you end up working in. Every single company is going to value that. So I love that you brought that up. I think that's really, really good.